Hello everyone, Namaste Swift India. My name is Nadia. Uh, I want to tell you a little bit today about nice tips and tricks how to make table scrolling smooth. So let's imagine we have an order app, which is actually Zomato delivery app, uh, and scrolling of the screen, let's say it's not very smooth. You can feel it by scrolling. So what to do? How to fix this thing? First of all, we need to measure what's wrong here. So before Xcode 12, there was nice instrument core animation, and these are results of improving scrolling speed in Zomato delivery app. We reached the goal 59 frames per second. This is how it should be. But in Xcode 12, things are a little bit different. To create the same instrument, you have to create a blank project first. And then also you can measure FPS. Why so? So in Xcode 12, in iOS 14, Apple introduced new measurement for any animations. So they don't measure FPS now, and they don't advise us to measure FPS. Now Apple measures hitches. So basically, it is how slower your interface is than it's needed. Hitches are measured in ratios, and it's also very useful for your project to measure this and to see if it's good or bad, whatever is happening. So I didn't like Xcode instrument much. I found it more useful to use hitches in UITest. So if you have iOS 14, you can measure hitches in UITests. But let's say you don't write UITests, but you still want to analyze your app and you still want to know what's happening. On the screen, you can see an example which I specially created to show you what may go wrong in your app and how to find it. So is a thing you can measure. It's exactly in simulator. So first thing is to color blended layers. What is blended layers? Those are layers which needs to be blended with layers which goes below them. So this takes time to render them. That's why they color it red here, and it means that here we need to improve those labels. Actually, they're transparent. That's why they need to be blended with background layers. Next thing you can check also in simulator is off-screen rendering. On this screen, there is a shadow which is rendering behind the image. And for this shadow, iOS system needs to calculate where shadow will be. So for this, off-screen rendering happens. And then one more rendering when you see it. It also slows scrolling a little bit, but overall scrolling may be lagging after that. And one more thing is misaligned images. What is this? It means that image which is loaded from API is much bigger than actually needed. It also slows scrolling a lot. So I've divided my tips into few categories, depends on how easy it will be for you to implement it in your project. Those are easy tips. Let's imagine you have a table and some of the cells, you don't have to reload them, but you still reuse them, you dequery them. So don't reuse cells if they don't need to be reused. Create it once, store it into your object, and just use it. Also, any calculations which go into cell row, they will cause slower rendering for everything. And don't add any loaders on cells. First, it doesn't look good, and second, it also slows all the scrolling. So any animations which are added on cells, they slow scrolling on tables. Next thing, you can check if cell has the same data. Why do you need to reload it? Don't reload it. Have some flags defined when that data need to be reloaded. If you have a long table and you have a lot of data and you do load more, be sure that load more goes in the background thread. And all the calculations should be there also. It's a good point to store all the calculations inside the view model. So it's possible to create some small view models for cells and save data there and then just reuse it fast. So no calculations. Next thing which needs to be optimized here are images. So we already checked that images may be bigger than needed. On this screen, you can see again the Zomato app, and you can see that pictures which are coming from the backend are 7.6 times bigger than needed, than actual size of the image view. So this also needs to be fixed. So these are tips. Talk to your backend guys, ask them to resize images for you. If it's not possible, then you have to resize it yourself. And do it in background thread, because it also slows down, stops the main thread. And one more thing you can do, obviously after resizing images, you can store your image as binary data inside your model for your cell. Obviously, it will increase memory consumption a little bit, but you will gain faster scrolling, so it's worth it. And obviously, you can clean your saved data as soon as that screen is not visible. It helps iOS to load images faster from memory than from any other source. So here we can see that just by having images with a proper size from the backend, we can reduce also network consumption. 2.5 times it was for the Zomato app. Next thing to optimize, we should look into labels. So if labels have not opaque background, then they have to be blended into other layers, and it will slow down all the rendering. So if you have a background with some solid color, it's better to have labels with the same color. It also takes more time to render attributed string. We did measure it, and when we avoided all the attributed strings, table became really faster. And just by any chance you use size to fit in any methods related to cells, creation of the cells, layout of the cells, just remove it, because this method, it also slows down rendering. It needs time to calculate things. Next thing to optimize is shadows. So to avoid screen rendering, we have to provide exact path for shadow. Then iOS will know where to put this shadow, and off-screen rendering will not be needed. Next few tips will be more complicated. So to implement them, you will need more time, more refactoring. Let's go. So if you have some rounded corners, to make it rounded, usually we just apply rounded corners for whole cell. But it's a bad idea because all the layers, all the views will need to be rounded. It's also overhead for iOS. So if you really need background views, just make one view rounded, which is the lowest one. So it will be less work for iOS to make everything rounded. Next thing, if you have some rounded corners for images, but you have a lot of images or a lot of things and you need everything to be really fast, you can just simulate your rounded corners, or you can simulate any other shapes and don't overload the system. So ask your designers to draw you some shapes which you need, put them on top, and for iOS it will be really faster to just render images, let's say, okay, on top of each other, but without any calculations. Just simulate things which are possible. Same goes to static gradients or backgrounds. Obviously, for us, for developers, it's easy to create gradient in code. But for us, it's also a lot of work to calculate it, render it. So if you have any solid backgrounds or gradients, just draw them or ask your designers to draw them and let iOS just render plain images. It will also increase whole performance of your table view. So applying all those tips which I just said, I've got these results for my test app. So you can see if we had not a pack labels, if we had off-screen rendering, we had around 57 FPS. And after applying all those things, we reached almost 59. Why not 60? Why not 59? Because still images here are wrong size. These are results from instruments. More complicated things which you can do to achieve more smooth scrolling, if it's not enough yet. So for iOS 13, there is a new data source which can help you with cell optimizations. Also, for rendering images in background threads, you will need to use layers. And texture is a good library for it. So for example, if you want to improve just images, but you don't want to rewrite your project, you can use just part of texture and just implement a simple thing, how to render your image in background thread. This is also a very nice example. There is a link to it. And Apple shows us how they do it. So basically, Apple loads all the images in some global cache, and then if table is not scrolling, it loads it in main thread. It's a very nice example. I really advise to check. Next thing which you can do to make scrolling faster, when you want to switch off the auto layout and don't allow the system to calculate any constraint, you can calculate everything manually. So basically what you can do, you parse data from the backend, you calculate everything in the background, all the heights for buttons, for texts for images, everything you calculate, store them into some model, and then just render it. To dive more, if you have more complicated UI, for example, some graphics, which needs to be changed very quickly, you will have to draw everything yourself. So by drawing with drawRect function, it's a function from UIView. Just draw everything yourself. Yes, it's very complicated, but it works really fast. So what we just improved by applying those techniques? We improved how fast images are loading. I mean, if you really agreed with your backend guys to make images smaller, scrolling performance we improved by applying also all of these tips, right? And network consumption may be improved by, again, creating smaller images on the background. On the backend, sorry. And there are a few things which you can do next. You can actually make all your UI in layers and can synchronously render them in the background. You can try to use pin cache or IGList kit, but all the things will need a lot of refactoring and a lot of work. So this is like, if you don't have any other options, you can go for it. But first, try simple things. Thanks.